Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Hello and welcome to the 16th Annual Virtual Counsellors Conference. My name is Kakinda Adrian, the Head of Advocacy of Uganda Counselling Association. In this year's Counsellors Conference, we are proudly powered and we proudly partnered with Refugee Law Project, and this year's theme is Attaining, a healthy body in a healthy mind. So we are proud and we are live on various platforms. Everyone who is watching out there, we are live on the YouTube channel for Refugee Law Project. We are live on the Facebook page of Refugee Law Project, and we are live on a Zoom. For those who are getting us on the Zoom webinar, we are live on Uganda Counselling Association Facebook page and Uganda Counselling Association YouTube channel. For those who are right here, welcome aboard. Our guests have already arrived and feel at home. So this is the 16th Annual Counsellors Virtual Conference. It's the first of its kind, thanks to Refugee Law Project and thanks to the Dutch Embassy, the Kingdom of Netherlands, for powering this conference this year. Indeed, we are grateful, we are humbled. So we are going to start with an opening prayer, and then we shall start with the National Anthem to kickstart our conference in a wonderful fashion. So I'll request all of us at Silver Springs to stand a bit, and we start with the National Anthem. Then we shall dive into the prayer so that we are blessed in this year's conference. So let's start I'll lead the national anthem. O Uganda, may God uphold thee. We lay our future in thy hand. United free foreign, together we always stand. I would request any volunteer to come and take us in an opening prayer. I think let me pick Mr. Jita Emmanuel, a counseling student of Campogo University, to take this podium and give us an opening prayer for this year's Counsellors Annual Virtual Conference. Thank you very much.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Heavenly Father, King of Kings, we are here today by the power of your glory upon us. We are here today by your choice, Father Lord. Many have not been able to make it. Many have not been able to survive for another day because of the pandemic that is claiming lives each and every day. Father Lord, as we are here today, we proclaim glory upon all that we are going to discuss. Shower us with your blessings, Father Lord. May your wisdom be upon us, Heavenly Father, as we come up with better ways of how to help the community, improve on mental health, and we be able to educate the world out there that is so naive and maybe has no information about mental health. And may we be blessed by the power of your Holy Spirit. In Jesus' mighty name we've prayed and believed. Amen.
Let's take our seats. Thank you very much. Mr. Jita Emmanuel is the president, I'm told, of the Campogo University Guidance and Counseling Students Association. All right. Our time check is 14 minutes past 9 a.m. East African Standard Time. Welcome aboard. Welcome once again. In this building, we have academicians, we have professional counselors, we have professional social workers, we have various individuals, we have clergy, we have teachers from all over the country. In this year's conference, as I said, we are trying to check and dig deeper in trying to bring solutions, especially to the forced migrants in this country. I know my colleagues are up here. We'll try to frame this conference and we get to know why this conference and why Uganda Counselling Association and Refugee Project. I welcome the president of Uganda Counselling Association, Mr. Gaston Byamugisha. You are welcome, sir. Mr. Gaston Byamugisha, you can wave to the audience. I welcome Dr. Chris Dolan, the director, Refugee Law Project. Thanks for making it up here. I welcome Mr. Apollo Kazungu, commissioner in the office of the Prime Minister. Thanks very much. I welcome Mr. Sambaga Patrick from TPO. Thanks very much. Allow me to welcome Mr. Gaston Byamugisha for the opening remarks of this year's conference. Mr. Gaston Byamugisha, the president of Uganda Counselling Association, you are welcome to the podium.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Thank you very much for coming. This conference is like a long-awaited wedding. You spend so many months planning it, and then the day comes, and then it happens. This conference was supposed to have taken place in March, a week away from the lockdown. Actually, we were supposed to start on a Wednesday, and then the lockdown was on a Friday, a week before. So we had to call for everything. Everything had already been planned. Of course, as you know, planning, some money was lost and a few other things didn't happen the way they were supposed to be. And then we went into a lockdown. And like many of us, we thought Corona had come and would be gone in a few months. And as we know the new reality, it hasn't gone. So we are going to learn to live and do things in a different way. And so we went back to the drawing board together with the Refugee project and said, since Corona is not going away, how do we do the conference in the new normal? And here we are after a lot of planning and sleepless nights and meetings and agreements and disagreements of opinion. And eventually we are here, and I want to congratulate ourselves that we have made it so far. I want to welcome all our friends that are joining us from across the country, from Guru, from Barara, from Ajumani, from Chijandongo, from every part of this country that are joining us. Thank you very much for joining us. We want to welcome our friends from Nigeria that are joining us on social media. We want to welcome our friends from Zambia, from Cameroon, from Botswana, from Kenya that have said they will be joining us. Thank you very much for this day. So as we know, things are different, so we are not going to take a lot of time because our times are measured. But my appreciation is that thank you all for making it, and those who are following on social media, please keep with us until 2 p.m. and then we'll be back again tomorrow for another session of the day from morning to 2 p.m. My appeal to the presenters is that we try and keep time so that we are able to keep people online. I know that keeping online for a whole day alone is not as easy as being in a conference hall. So with those few remarks, may I invite Dr. Chris Dolan to make welcome remarks.
Thank you very much, Gaston, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. All protocol observed. I get to speak again in a while when I shall go through welcoming more formally. But it is a great thing that when you think you are about to get married and you have to postpone the wedding, that the subsequent wedding is much better than the one you had planned originally. And so I really think that today we're starting a good marriage, but with also a very expanded guest list compared to what we had in mind in spring this in March this year. So I think it will greatly enrich our discussions, and I hope it will also enrich the impact of these 2 days where we're together both physically and virtually. So let me just welcome you, and particularly on behalf of Refugee Law Project, and with a big thanks to Uganda Counselling Association and the team from UTA that has made this happen together with the team from RLP. It's been not an easy discussion, an easy journey. Trying to organize anything with COVID-19 has been an extra set of challenges. So I'm particularly grateful, as I know Gaston is as well, to our respective teams for collaborating over the last 9 months to get us to where we are. Thank you very much. And I think it falls to me to now invite the Commissioner for Refugees from Office of the Prime Minister, Mr. Apollo Kazungu, to give us some introductory remarks. Commissioner, you're welcome.
Thank you, and morning to all. I'm called Kazungu, David Apollo, Commissioner for Refugees in Office of the Prime Minister. It's indeed an honor for us to be here to talk about mental health, and more so specifically addressing mental health as a challenge to refugees in Uganda. As you might be aware, Uganda currently hosts over 1.4 million refugees in the country, and of these, 80% are women and children. These have run away from various human rights violations in their countries, ranging from loss of property, disruption of cultures, and their usual of life, and sexual violence, among others. And of course, adjusting to a new life in a country of refuge is not an easy task, and this all affects their well-being. COVID-19 has accentuated their physical needs while in refuge and continues to threaten their lives, as indeed it does to those of the nationals in Uganda, adding to already existing trauma and making families, men and women and children more vulnerable. Loss of livelihoods has left many, particularly in urban areas, destitute. As the pandemic continues, the long-term interplay between existing trauma and COVID-related stress requires thorough attention and interventions to be put in place to deal with not only the physical and psychosocial impact of psychological impact of COVID-19 to refugees, individuals, families, and communities. COVID-19 has also affected the host communities in which these refugees live. And indeed, if you went to some of these settlements today, you will find that there are quarantine centers where both nationals and refugees are getting access. Uganda's refugee policy gives all refugees freedom to live and work in Uganda in order to become self-reliant. This policy brings refugees and hosts in same places. This is the very reason why the CRRF, Comprehensive Refugee Response Framework, focuses on humanitarian and development needs of both refugees and host communities. Psychosocial support is, of course, very critical to the refugee response. Why is psychosocial support critical? Many refugees have gone through painful experiences that leave their bodies and minds bruised. It's difficult to achieve resilience and self-reliance without addressing the mental and psychosocial needs of refugees to enable them to have healthy minds that think, remember, hope, and plan for the future. Psychosocial support is key to local integration. It promotes resilience and economic development for both the refugees and their host communities. While intervening in the refugee response in countries, we've experienced gaps in psychosocial support, and these gaps include under-prioritization of psychosocial support in interventions, limited training of psychosocial support workers in the various settlements, and of course, this goes hand in hand with limited funding to psychosocial support activities. We therefore think that mainstreaming of mental health and support in refugee management is critical. There is need to invest in training of social workers in a way that enables them to understand the complex mental and psychosocial dynamics of refugees as they live alongside the hosts. Donors and development partners have done a commendable job in addressing the physical needs of refugees, including food, shelter, and water, among others. However, it's time to invest more in addressing the underlying mental and psychosocial needs of refugees that affect their livelihoods and coexistence with their hosts. There is need to invest in livelihood programs for refugees and vulnerable hosts in order to reduce the psychosocial stressors that affect mental well-being. It is my hope that this conference will contribute towards coming up with more practical ways of incorporating context-appropriate and accessible psychosocial services for both the refugees and host communities. Thank you so much for coming to attend this conference, and I wish you all fruitful deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kazungu, for that wonderful welcome remarks from the office of the OPM. I think that statement was very strong in regard to the COVID-19 pandemic and the way it has affected the mental health of the refugees, the forced migrants, and of course the host communities in our country. Thanks very much. Allow me to welcome Mr. Campogo from TPO for a welcome remark as we prepare for our first session today.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I wish to correct, my names are not Campogo, but I'm Sambaga. I was actually going to start with that comment, but we should have this in here. Ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. Thank you for coming. I'm privileged. Thank you for thank you organizers for welcoming me to make some introductory remarks. I appreciate. I work at TPO Uganda. TPO Uganda is a development and humanitarian organization working in Uganda. It's a national organization. We've been around for 27 years. Our core mandate is our core mandate is mental health and psychosocial support. But over the years, we've had to make some responsive reactions and introduce livelihoods, gender and sexual and gender-based violence, child protection, humanitarian work, and in order to meet the needs of the people as we went along to address their social, mental and psychosocial needs. TPO Uganda has implemented both refugees and the post-conflict mental health and psychosocial support projects in 3 regions of the country within over 20 districts for the past 25 years. Projects' thematic areas cover mental health and psychosocial support, child protection, livelihoods, and sexual and gender-based violence. Keeping up with the demands for the services and service provision over the years has been largely dependent on our choice of approach, which is community-based, supported and implemented through a team of community structures, leaders, teams of experts from child protection, sexual and gender-based violence, livelihoods, clinical psychologists, psychiatric clinical officers, social workers, project coordinators, and headquartered-based managers who provide guidance and supervision. The provision of mental health and psychosocial support services remains a challenge among refugees who are still experiencing post-trauma symptoms from war and forced displacement, and currently exacerbated by the outbreak of COVID-19. According to World Health Organization 2020 Global Rapid Assessment on the impact of COVID-19 on mental, neurological, and substance use disorders, prevention and promotion of mental health services and programs have been most severely affected. This situation has exposed refugees to several negative coping behaviors So there is a need to have a massive mental health and psychosocial awareness raising in our community. We need to recognize that mental health and psychosocial challenges are real, and they do not necessarily undermine your dignity or your integrity. You can have it just like anybody having malaria, and there is a solution to it. Not many people know that there is a solution to mental health challenges. We think that there is also need to do some policy reviews which criminalize suicide. In many countries in Africa, suicide is a criminal act. Just like murder is a criminal act, the laws of these many countries in Africa think that suicide, actually they have made the laws to make suicide criminal. And I think that that's not healthy. I think we need to revisit the policies and the laws of these countries, including Uganda, because the implications are also very negative. So I think this is a challenge for us as players. As I conclude my remarks, I want to give a story. A few months ago, I had a young man in his early 20s. He had taken to alcoholism, and he had messed up his life. Through some individual counseling, the young man decided to change his lifestyle. When he changed his lifestyle, he had challenges. He felt he was hearing voices. And he could share a few of his experiences, challenges with some people in the community. Many people dismissed him outright. He just said, you take away your alcohol. They didn't pay attention, and nobody was there to support him. A few weeks into this experience, he decided to commit suicide. He was talking to a friend in his sitting room, and he went to the bedroom and hanged himself. And as a person who is an actor in this sector, I felt that this young man had missed an opportunity to live. Why? Because there was nobody in the community who understood him. There's nobody in the community who could address his problem, who could encourage him, who could counsel him. Today, as we gather here as counselors, I think we need to know that the need is huge. How many people, like my cousin, have taken their lives because there was no support in that community, in the entire community? It has made me think, as I work in this sector, many people are losing lives. COVID has not made things any easier. It has actually complicated it. And we are there. We have counselors, but where are these counselors? Are they there in my community, in my village? Are they there in your village, in your community? Most likely we are concentrated around the cities, the urban areas, and probably in the refugee camps we have a few. But the need is huge. I'm thinking, even as we sit here, wherever you are, I'm sure you have come across a person who has had a mental health challenge. Whether a relative, a friend, an acquaintance, you have come across so many of them. And what could you do? What can be done? My view is that we need to raise awareness about mental health challenges to a level that everybody understands it, everybody can know that there's a solution, and that when a problem happens, a solution can be found. And part of that is the personnel, the counselors. They are not there. I am thinking, and I would like to invite all of us here, and people outside this room, and policymakers, and government officials, and NGOs. I think we need to do something about this. We need to train people, equip people with the skills in counseling to address mental health challenges, both in our settled communities as well as in the refugee settlements. And I'm thinking that because it touches all of us. And and I believe that we need to play an advocacy role. Over the next couple of years, 3, 4, 5, 10 years, we would like to see counselors placed at every health center in this country, every health center 3 probably, or a health center 4. If my cousin knew, if the community around knew that there was a solution, that there was a counselor at the health center 4, I want to suspect that somebody would have directed him there. He would have gone there and found a counselor who would have attended to him, and he probably would live. And how many have died because there was no such? So that's a challenge I would like to leave us all. We are all actors. We are all stakeholders in this sector, and we all can do something about this, and we should do something about this. Thank you very much, and stay well.
Thanks very much, Mr. Sambaga Patrick from TPO, for that insightful remark concerning mental health in Uganda. As the PLR of Uganda Counselling Association, he echoed something. Our counselors there in the villages, oh, they are just here in this, it's something to think about, because I know they are there. Maybe they don't market themselves there in the villages, or the residents of those villages don't know that we have counselors here. They keep on going to the educated singers, educated coaches, and mental health issues are rampant. Thanks very much for that wonderful remark. Allow me to introduce to you Dr. Oralo Charles, the Director of Clinical Services in the Ministry of Health, is here with us. And at this particular moment, I would like to welcome him for a remark as we gear up our conference, the 2020 16th Annual Counsellors Conference. And this year's conference is virtual. Actually, it's blended. Some on Zoom, some on social media, some on digital platforms, some are live. Silver Springs Hotel in Kampala. Thanks very much for watching. Welcome, Dr. Oralo.
Thank you. Thank you, Director of Ceremonies, the Commissioner in the Office of the Prime Minister, Mr. Apollo Kasungu, the President of the Uganda Counsellors Association, the Director of the Refugee Law Project, and all the counsellors, the members of the Psychiatric Association, my colleagues from the Ministry of Health, ladies and gentlemen. I am privileged this morning to be here, and it's really my pleasure. It's my pleasure to join you on the 16th Uganda Counsellors Conference, on which the theme is Attaining a Healthy Mind in a Healthy Body amidst COVID-19, which is going to focus on forced migration, mental health, and gender. But before I begin, I hope all of you are keeping safe and observing all the COVID-19 standard operating procedures. Because as of yesterday, Uganda had confirmed about 18,000 cases, 18,890. And specifically yesterday, we had about 484 new cases and 5 deaths. And we've so far registered 191 deaths, which representing a case fatality of 191. And I think this is also relevant to our discussion today on issues of attaining a healthy mind in a healthy body. So as a country, or as the world, on March 2020, the World Organization declared the novel corona disease a global pandemic. and is one of those which has been causing definitely serious challenges worldwide, which has been faced in recent times. And a crisis which is coupled with unprecedented human rights violations, health and socio-economic consequences. And I think there is nobody who has been not affected. And I think it's even worse with even those who, when they are, who are facing forced migration. And as Kasungu will tell you from here, definitely has got implications in terms of resource mobilization for him to be able to do it. For both their social upkeep, but also including aspect of the mind. So COVID has really been a wake-up call for all of us towards promoting mental well-being. And I'm sure you are here, you might not even have got COVID, but definitely you are living in uncertainty. You are not very sure. And sometimes you think that probably those who have already got and got cured have probably developed the immunity. Now about those who have not yet got the COVID. Many people have been affected, both refugees and host population. And you heard what people have gone, the experience they have gone through: quarantine, isolation. Some of them have lost jobs, inability to move freely. And this has left many people struggling, depressed and struggling. It has also led to violence at homes. And if I got very well, the Minister of State for Gender indicated during this time, he indicated we had lost about 121 people due to one. They had died because of aspect of violence. So loss of loved ones or ill health of loved, all this definitely increase. And then there's also increase in suicidal behavior, which is a sign of frustration. But I'm happy that during this conference, those are some of the key presentations, some of the areas where we are going to look at what are the challenges, but also we look at what are the opportunities which do exist. We are going to look at the access of mental health and psychological services in the refugees under the COVID pandemic. The COVID-19 restrictions and the people's mental health is also going to be shared. And the silent epidemic within a pandemic, which is the suicide prevention. So all those are really key in this meeting today. As has been highlighted, Uganda hosts 1.4 million refugees and is the third largest in the world. While the open door policy is being mooted as very progressive, definitely it has come with constraints of resources. It's key to recognize that although forced migrants are at a greater risk, a lot of attention also needs to be invested in addressing mental health to host populations equally. And that's why the mental health and psychological support services are key and working towards integrating these services across board in all respective areas. You can no longer ignore the issues of mental health. And if you ignore it, definitely you know what the cost it has. You know, we need to look at mental health as aspect of an investment. Because definitely first, as the member of TPU has indicated, when you have a healthy mind, then you can seek all the what? You can be able to look. But even when you have mental health challenges, then it means that all other things are incapacitated. And this will be form of lost capital development, lost to government, lost productivity, relatives have to look at. So I think as a country, working with WHO, we're trying to work up and see what is that which we are losing, or why should we justify to invest in mental health? I also want to highlight that Uganda signed a bilateral agreement with some Gulf Cooperation Council countries to externalize female domestic workers. And you know that in the crisis like COVID, migrant workers are often at a risk of increased vulnerability to exploitative practices and might find themselves without employment or compelled to work under high-risk situations without protective measures recommended for risk reduction. The women migrants, domestic workers may also be heightened at a risk of sexual exploitation and abuse. It's known worldwide that mental health and psychosocial support, including counseling, can help people undergo a stressful situation, including refugees and internally displaced persons, to build resilience and better their mental health and improve their well-being. I want to specifically mention on the internally displaced. If you definitely visit Assese, you'll find people are internally because of aspect of natural disasters, and the rivers every other time is breaking its backs. So this is really, that is something which is with us, and we really be able to do on, to work with it. The Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Public Service is undertaking restructuring of human resources, both across both the local governments and at regional hospitals, and is really in the interest of the Ministry of Health that we include the counsellors as part of the public service. Because we have been knowing that we have diverted the midwives and nurses from doing what is their core function to doing task sharing in terms of counseling. So we really want to do that. We get a cadre, which is basically its role is to counsel. The conference bringing together different stakeholders, including academicians, medical doctors, mental health workers, educationists, and others, both at national and district level, is a good step in the right direction and a commitment to promote mental health and psychosocial support in Uganda. Globally, the world is continually recognizing mental health and psychological support as a priority. I must say that just last year in October, when I attended the International Conference on Mental Health and Psychosocial Support Crisis Situation, which was organized in Amsterdam, to discuss mind the issues and based on the principle of mind your mind, and this was key and particularly in relation to humanitarian settings. And Uganda was represented and also was attended by the director of the Uganda Refugee Law and many other participants from Uganda. I would like to appreciate the Netherlands Minister of Foreign Affairs for the support for this conference. It's a sign of commitment that the Dutch government has towards addressing mental health in a humanitarian setting and promoting a sustainable development. This conference was a step towards networking among humanitarian practitioners and other stakeholders to enhance mental health and psychosocial support. If it was not for COVID, we had agreed, working with WHO, to agree on minimum standards for mental health, which each country will be able to adopt. This displacement fundamentally affects the mental health and physical well-being of host migrants and needs to be addressed if refugees have to live a productive life, but also break the cycle of ill health. Physical health and mental health are interdependent, and the two should be looked and addressed concurrently to promote holistic well-being. Poor mental health affects both the physical health and vice versa. Failure to address mental health needs can be an obstacle to living a healthy, productive life and attending a healthy mind in a healthy body, particularly in the current COVID situation. I want to thank the conveners of this meeting for inviting the Minister of Health And I wish you a fruitful deliberation during these 2 days. And I'm optimistic, definitely, you will be able to share the conference recommendations with the Mental Health Division of the Ministry of Health. I thank you all for listening, for God and my country.
Thank you very much, Dr. Charles Oralo, Director Clinical Services at the Ministry of Health. Thanks for the good news you've come with as the mental health world. We've been struggling with how far can we work with government, how far can our employees get immersed in the mainstream. Now that was a good one, Dr. Oralo, when you said you are working out something which will see professional counselors do their job, not getting someone to do something again. That's a good one. I think I'll ask for a round of applause from the audience here. And we pray that that policy goes through, because by the end of the day, the issues of mental health, you cannot stop mental health issues if the human resource is not practically streamlined. That one is just a joke. So, as the Ministry of Health is embarking in that, you have our full support. And I think, actually, Uganda has trained enough mental health practitioners, and they are still training, meaning we have enough. Now it's time to utilize the professionals at that level. Allow me to welcome once again all members who have just joined us. My name is Kakinda Adrian. I'm the head of advocacy. I love being called the PLO of Uganda Counselling Association, the premier body that regulates counseling training and practice in this country. Then I welcome everyone who's coming from the countryside to this 16th annual Counsellors virtual conference. Our hashtag is Counsellors Conference 2020. So if you're tweeting, if the digital language, you use our hashtag, by the end of the day, we shall be trending all over the world. Now, the next on the program, I know you have the program with you. We are going to launch this conference, and I will call the director, Dr. Chris Dolan, who will call the ambassador of the Dutch embassy, to now launch this in a more exquisite fashion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we had hoped very much that the ambassador would be able to join us physically, but unfortunately that was not possible. But she will still be here with us. Just before we screen her opening remarks, just to add to, well, first to thank the panel for all the very in-depth introductory remarks. I think you have already begun to very much set the scene for the 2 days. And then also to pick up from what Dr. Olaro mentioned, the conference on Mind the Mind, which was held in Amsterdam last year, and which in many ways kick-started this collaboration, because it was an initiative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and particularly the Minister Sigrid Kaag, to really push mental health and psychosocial issues up the international agenda, and of course also at a national level. And certainly all of us who were there, I think, took inspiration from that conference, and a new energy and a new commitment to see what other steps can we take to promote this agenda. And so really, I think we owe a great vote of thanks to the Netherlands government, and specifically the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and specifically Minister Kaag, for helping to catalyze the kind of discussions that we are having today and tomorrow. So with that said, I would like to welcome the ambassador to speak, but because of the COVID-19 situation, we had to pre-prepare this, and the ambassador very kindly, despite having to isolate herself, agreed to make our welcoming remarks on camera, and that is what we shall play you now. So without further ado, I'd like to ask the technical team to play for us the welcoming remarks of Her Excellency, the Ambassador of the Netherlands to Uganda. Thank you.
Good morning to all of you, representatives of the government, districts, communities and organizations, distinguished guests. My name is Karin Boven and I'm the Ambassador of the Netherlands. It gives me great pleasure today to be part of the 16th Annual Counsellors Conference, Attaining a Healthy Mind in a Healthy Body Amidst COVID-19, focused on forced migration, mental health and gender. Migration is a key area of interest to the Netherlands government, and efforts are being made towards better migration in our development policies. In addition to our focus areas in Uganda, like food security, water and climate, sustainable trade and investment, gender equality, women's rights, the Netherlands government is particularly committed to working together with the Uganda government in supporting refugees and their host communities. This is done through improving the legal position and social protection of the targeted communities, improving access to sexual and reproductive health, improving the livelihood, economic development and decent work opportunities for both refugees and their vulnerable host communities. Uganda's open door policy to asylum seekers and refugees is a good solidarity example to the world. Uganda's national systems are inclusive of refugees, and the Comprehensive Refugee Response Framework, the CRRF, has rapidly changed the coordination model in Uganda such that all actors are now talking to and consulting each other. It is especially important to note that the response plans developed under the CRRF model, such as the Education Response Plan, the Health and Integrated Response Plan, as well as the draft Jobs and Livelihoods Plan, highlight the importance of meeting the mental and psychosocial needs of refugees and their host communities. I am also aware that the government of Uganda, through its Ministry of Health, is committed to strengthening its response to mental health and having an inclusive and integrated approach to MHPSS. Asylum seekers and refugees face a lot of hardship during and after their flight, and this affects their mental health. Therefore, the resilience and confidence of refugees and their host communities should continue being strengthened so that they can actively participate in and contribute to the societies and communities they live in. And this is especially critical during this COVID-19 pandemic. Refugees and their host communities have innovative ideas that can improve their own situation during this time. So it's important to listen to and engage with them. Last year, on 8 October 2019, Minister Sigrid Kaag, the Netherlands Minister for Foreign Trade and Development Cooperation, hosted the Mind Now conference, in which most of the participants in this room today, such as the government of Uganda, the Refugee Law Project and War Child Holland, participated in. Ministers and high-level representatives from different countries and international organizations convened in Amsterdam to discuss the importance of addressing the mental health and psychosocial support needs of people affected by emergency situations and protracted crisis. Mental health and psychosocial support is high on the agenda because we believe that it should be part and parcel of the basic assistance. It is as important as shelter, food, and water. And we therefore advocate for better integration of MHPSS in the humanitarian and development interventions being provided. I'm therefore especially happy that Uganda is giving special attention to this subject and is pursuing the commitments made at the Amsterdam conference. This conference here today is another step in the right direction. The Netherlands Embassy is delighted to partner with you in advancing the MHPSS agenda, especially in areas of forced migration and mental health service provisions. To finalize, I would like to take the opportunity to wish you fruitful deliberations as you share and document experiences and together strengthen the counseling profession. The importance of counseling in handling mental health and psychosocial challenges amongst the forced migrants and their host communities needs our attention and continued support. I wish you all the best, stay safe, good luck, and thank you.
Thank you again, and thank you again to the Embassy and to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for those wonderful opening remarks and for further building the kind of scene setting for where some of the thinking behind this conference comes from. And I'm happy that we have a representative from the Embassy in the room. Maybe, Joy, you could identify yourself. Thank you. So I think we now move to the actual beginning of the main conference. And I would like to thank the Commissioner. He is asked to be excused for another function, but to thank you once again for making it to this important event. Can we have a round of applause for the Commissioner, please?
Thanks very much, Dr. Chris Dolan. Dr. Chris Dolan, the Director of Refugee Project, who are our partners in this year's conference, and we are really indeed glad. We are here to start our program, and we've already laid out Dr. Charles Olalo, the Director of Clinical Services in the Ministry of Health. Welcome aboard once again in this year's 16th Annual Counsellors Conference, wherever you're watching from. For those who are watching from the diaspora, thanks very much for your time. For those who are lucky and alive in this place at Silver Springs Hotel, Kampala, thanks very much for your time. So this conference is for 2 days. Today, Thursday, 26th of November 2020, and tomorrow, Friday, 27th of November 2020. I would like to, we have a panel which we are going to start with today. And the session chair for this panel is Mr. Gaston Biamgisha. Is our session chair. In this panel, we have various presenters who are going to present something, and it's going to be moderated by Mr. Gaston Biamgisha for this session. I would like to call Mr. Gaston Biamgisha to call the various presenters who are going to start off our conference, and we kick off. All right. Oh, sorry. Our first session chair is Mr. Jimmy Wamimbi from Refugee Law Project. And we have, now this panel is going to discuss mental health and COVID-19, challenges, lessons, and opportunities. And our first presenter will be Madam Mary Campogo from Refugee Law Project. Is going to discuss access to mental health and psychosocial services for refugees under the COVID-19 pandemic. So, session chair, Mr. Jimmy Wamimbi, you can take. As Mr. Jimmy Wamimbi is taking center, I would like, very many have been asking themselves, what's all about this conference? What's happening with the conference? Why are we focusing on the forced migrants? Why are we focusing on mental health and gender in this year's conference? I have this opportunity to invite the Director of Refugee Law Project. Is going to frame the discussion as the panel takes center. So it's going to discuss for us the nexus between forced migration, mental health, and gender. And after we shall reflect on the framing, and I think we shall be good to go to kick off with our panel number 1. So Dr. Chris, let's digest the honors of this conference.
Thank you very much. I think in the interest of time, I will just say, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed, but I would like to recognize the participation of some members who have not yet had mention. We do have a representative from prisons, the chairpersons of Lamour and Kiriandongo districts. We have online representatives from the Ministry of Education Zambia and the Ministry of Education Cameroon. You are most welcome. We have Caritas, Counsellors Training from Gulu and other NGOs represented. We have quite a number of different universities represented, some here and some online, including, of course, Makerere, but also University Kisubi, Campogo, Uganda Martyrs, Uganda Christian University, and further afield, University of East London in the UK, University of Bergen, Norway, and the University of Botswana. We also have refugee representatives from Adjumani, Lamour, Kiriandongo, Yumbe, Changwali, and Kampala. We have media representatives. So I think, ladies and gentlemen, counsellors and other mental health and psychosocial support, students and experts, online and here present, I think you will agree we have an outstanding combination of participants in this blended event. But how many of you in this room and online may well have had your own experience of forced migration? Or maybe you're the children or the child of forced migrants. You or your parents were maybe internally displaced people or refugees or trafficked persons. Maybe you were born in exile. I know we have colleagues with the name Otim and Atim. That is often a reflection of having been born in exile for the Acholi. Maybe you were deported at some point in your life from the UK or some other unwelcoming environment. I don't think we should assume that we know each other's histories in this room. My own ancestors on my mother's side, around 1800, were refugees from France who fled across the border into Switzerland. And there is a whole There's a tiny little village up there in the mountains on the border, full of graves with my mother's family name. How many of you knew that part of me is Swiss or maybe partly French? Very few, I should think. When we look at physical health, the causes of ill health and injury are generally quite clear. But what is the mental health equivalent of a broken leg, a vaginal fistula, a bullet wound, a panga cut, a rectal prolapse, a bacterial infection that just does not seem to respond to antibiotics, a limb lost in a bomb blast? The specific causes underlying mental ill health are generally more difficult to pin down so closely. Although we see the symptoms, anxiety, depression, insomnia, withdrawal, self-isolation, irritability, lethargy, pessimism, we also tend to get blinded to what lies behind the not-so-helpful coping strategies, such as alcoholism, substance abuse, domestic violence, and even, as Patrick described, suicide. And yet, some of the circumstances or scenarios that cause mental health challenges are very clear. What does it do to your mental health if you broke your leg while fleeing violence? If you're suffering from fistula due to gang rape by soldiers? If you are caught in the crossfire and you still have a bullet lodged in a place where it is hard to remove it from? If you're incontinent due to gang rape by soldiers or because you were raped with an object while being tortured? If your genitals were mutilated as a result of stepping on a landmine? What does it do to your mental health if you witnessed sexual violence or experienced it directly? Do our understandings of self-image and self-esteem give us enough traction to deal with such scenarios? When a woman is raped and feels that she can never enjoy an intimate relationship again, do we know how to address this loss of sexual integrity? When a man is raped and fears that he has been turned into a gay, are we trained to explore his fears with him? When victims of attacks by armed persons in uniform jump in fright every time they see a traffic police, do we know how to desensitize them and restore some sense of personal security? And what counselling can we give to parents who've not only lost all their children, but also their own capacity to reproduce, children to replace the ones that were killed? And how far are we really able to go in dealing with the psychosocial issues arising from such physical and psychological injuries and losses? Do we know enough about the refugee system to be able to critically assess the level of stress created by losing something simple like your asylum seeker identification papers? Do we have any kind of understanding of the kind of situations that people have left behind them and why? Have we calculated the mental health costs of language barriers that literally cause the refugees to lose their voice? What are we going to tell that man who has been socialized to believe that it is his role and his responsibility to put food on the table, but who cannot get any job that can accommodate his skills and the injuries? How are we going to give young people a sense of a future when they cannot get back to school in their country of exile due to poverty? What about the person who had just about completed 5 or 6 years training as a medic or a lawyer, but now has no papers to prove it because they had to flee with just the clothes on their back? Will sending them on a vocational training course be enough? Does what we learned about cognitive behavioral therapy work for this complex of issues? Is an 8-week course of structured group therapy helpful for depressed refugees who are living hand to mouth and whose family support systems have been destroyed in the conflict they fled from. When a client returns to us again and again, complaining of body pain, despite having been sent to on multiple visits to doctors, do we understand that what we are seeing is an example of what a Dutch psychiatrist, Bessel van der Kolk, means when he says that the body keeps the score? What tools do we have, if any, for integrating our response to psychosomatic complaints into our healing work? How do we, as professional counselors, give back to someone their social status, their sense of belonging to a particular community, the self-esteem with which to speak in public spaces? How do we give back their gendered being, their sense of masculinity or femininity? And how do we do this if the very forced migrants that we work with, as for example with the refugees in northern Uganda, are being hosted by people whose own trauma has never been fully addressed? What does that mean for coexistence, for interpersonal conflicts, and how we come in to support individuals, households, and community mental health? To make matters more complex still, when we were being trained, were we taught to recognize and respond to transgenerational trauma, or to work with the perpetrators struggling with what they did before they were demobilized? And if they do tell us what they did, have we been trained to know how to deal with that information professionally? What about when there is a clear justice need for a survivor of gross human rights violations? What is our role as counselors in helping that person to pursue truth-telling, accountability, or reparations? To what extent are those who are training counselors in this part of the world, in East Africa, incorporating the lessons that maybe should have been learned from this region's own experiences? When you were training, did you have any lectures on helping people to cope with genocide? What about helping people not to go stir crazy in the course of 20 years of internal displacement, or 30 years of not knowing whether your children are alive or dead, only that they were taken from you in the middle of the night? When we work with a raped woman, were we also taught how to work with her children who witnessed her being raped? Were we taught to help people deal with survivor guilt? In short, other models that we're taught fit for purpose when we're talking about MHPSS in humanitarian settings? Are our existing structures fit for purpose? Do they resonate with people's worldviews, with their spiritual or religious beliefs, their understandings of gender norms, their understanding of family? So as you can see, there are many questions for us to tackle here today and tomorrow. And it often feels as though there are more questions than answers when it comes to MHPSS in humanitarian settings, and correspondingly many gaps, and more gaps than there are interventions. And that itself can be a source of stress for all of us. And maybe we need some self-care. But it should also be a great motivator for us and an inspiration for us to understand and engage in, and to make every effort to bring mental health and psychosocial support much closer to the forefront of humanitarian response. For as was highlighted by the Commissioner for Refugees, Uganda currently hosts more than 1.4 million refugees. That is the largest population of refugees in any one country on this continent, and it's the third largest refugee population in the world. And I think that, coming from the refugee sector, I can say that where Uganda leads, others will follow. So I think it really is incumbent us to wrap our heads around those very many questions. And there are some answers. For Refugee Law Project, some of the lessons we have learned can help us to address these many questions. A key lesson which summarizes some of the questions actually is that some of the mental health needs are very specific to the kinds of experiences that lead to forced migration. And they require us as counsellors to have correspondingly specific and particular knowledge and skills. And our counselling curriculum needs to build that in. Equally, we know that these mental health needs are compounded, aggravated by the psychosocial pressures that build up in the place or the country of asylum. And sometimes the entry point to the mental health needs has to be actually, a starting point has to be tackling the social issues, either before working with individual counselling or alongside it. So there is a therapeutic challenge if we have been trained as professionals to work as individual counsellors to adjust ourselves to understanding that some of the steps towards mental well-being cannot be achieved by counselling alone. And I'll just give you some examples of what I mean by that in terms of our work project. Early identification of physical injuries and referral for medical support can do a huge amount to reduce individual psychological and psychosocial stress. Long-term relationships with clients that are not structured around their individual case file, but more around a frequent interaction, can do wonders to a person's sense of security. Peer support groups that create parallel social structures to some of the ones that have been lost allow people to rebuild a sense of purpose, belonging, status. They also create a space in which people can reclaim that very empowering capacity to be the ones giving rather than always finding themselves on the receiving end from people who appear reluctant to give anyway. Demystifying mental health issues so we don't get the scenario that was described of the young man who doesn't feel able to go. Demystifying mental health challenges through training of peer counsellors can do a lot to turn the community from a stigmatizing space that compounds the individual's difficulties to a healing space in which recovery becomes much more possible. English language skills that allow a person to navigate her difficulties with officials, with doctors, with landlords, with employers, can work wonders on a person's self-confidence, and they contribute hugely to the psycho challenge, I would call it, of making the place of asylum livable. Giving people new marketable skills, and particularly language skills that allow them to speak for themselves, literally gives people back their voices. I think if this were more a workshop setting, I would invite you to take off your masks and put on some, tie up your mouth so that you can't speak, and then try to explain your most pressing need. And I'm sure you can imagine, even with just your masks, what that might feel like. And then try to imagine that you always feel like that. Every day you wake up thinking, I don't know how to get my needs across to anybody in this particular country just because I don't have the language skills. So we sometimes say that one of our biggest psychosocial interventions is teaching English. Giving young people technical skills such as videography with which they can begin to earn money and also dream big about their future maybe does more for their mental well-being than one-on-one counseling. Or it may be that in combination with one-on-one counseling, it can become the cure for a person's poor mental health. holding what we as Refugee Law Project call memory dialogues in communities. That can be the psychological and psychosocial equivalent of lancing a boil that has not yet burst. A way of releasing toxins that have been building up for many years. And that lancing the boil can be the start of both individual and community healing. I think we have COVID-19 in the title of the conference. I think we can say, though, that, yeah, COVID-19 has exacerbated mental and psychosocial needs, but they are needs which have been largely in existence. Or what COVID-19 has helped us to do is to see them more clearly, as well as to aggravate some of them. And it has challenged us, certainly, in terms of the way that mental health and psychosocial support is offered. Those SOPs have prevented us, for example, from bringing people together for dialogues, for workshops, for trainings. The SOPs have required more community-led interventions, which has not been without its silver lining. It has been very good for generating more understanding of a so-called localization agenda. And of course, it has reskilled us, or we've upgraded our skills to be able to do more virtual support. In conclusion, I hope these many questions I've put out there, they are framing questions rather than giving all the answers. Because if we had all the answers, why would we be coming to talk? I think this is a great space, both physical and virtual. And the great interest of partners from across the continent and all the way to London and Bergen give us a really amazing and unique opportunity to explore what we mean by mental health and psychosocial support in humanitarian settings. They allow us to tackle, this space allows us to identify what we do well, where we could strengthen it, how we can work together to inform each other's work and advance the broad agenda of MHPSS, how we can measure and communicate mental health in ways that attract, as has been mentioned several times, much needed government and development partners to fund the mental health and psychosocial support interventions. So let me end there. I think it's a very timely conference, and I'm delighted once again to welcome you all. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Chris, for that amazing remark. Now we know why this conference. We know the conference has been reframed. At this particular time, I want to pick some concerns or comments, if any, from the audience about his remarks concerning the annual Counsellors Conference of this year and our theme of attaining a healthy mind in a healthy body amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, with a clear focus on forced migration, mental health, and gender. Now it's quite clear, it's clear to the audience. Then I will try to pick if there is any comment online. Is there any comment from the audience about what Dr. Chris has just shared here? You can raise your hand as we also pick some comments from the online audience. Then after, all right, I'm looking at the YouTube channel for Refugee Law Project. Basically, most people are just appreciating Dr. Chris for the remark. I'm looking at Maureen Kahima. He's saying thank you very much for that reframing. You know, he was talking about the nexus between, forced migration and mental health and gender. It sounded somehow emotional at the start, when he started by saying, can you imagine, your genitals get mutilated? I thought, oh, that one is very hard. Who has ever been forced out of home? You find yourself in the countryside over there. Things are not okay. It's not your home actually. How would you feel? How can you overcome? I want to, just at a light moment, I don't know how people at Refugee Law Project are handling, because most of these cases are traumatic in that extreme. Mr. Akula, hope you do some self-care to soften a bit, because the cases you always handle with the forced migrants and the refugees in this country can also throw you into depression. All right. I think there is no any kind of reflection. I would hand over this microphone to the session chair of our first panel, Mr. Jimmy Wamimbi from Refugee Law Project. He has already taken his seat, and then he will invite the three panelists for this session called Mental Health and COVID-19. What are the challenges? What are the lessons? And what are the opportunities? Welcome, Mr. Jimmy.
Thank you very much, the day manager, for inviting me to chair the first session of the 16th Annual Counsellors Conference. Ladies and gentlemen, and others following us online and those present here physically, all protocols observed. My name, once again, is Jimmy Wamimbi. I work for the Refugee Law Project as a field office coordinator, Gulu. I would like to take this opportunity to invite my panelists to come and take up these seats. Miss Mary Campogo, please move forward and take up your seat. There's been an adjustment on the program. If you look at your program, you're expecting Dr. Hafsa Lukwata, but there has been an adjustment. So Dr. Kenneth Kalani Okwari is standing in. Please, Doctor, you're welcome. And finally, Dr. Claire Kasende is with us here. Please welcome and take up your seat. Thank you so much, my panelists, for taking up your seats. Once again, I join earlier communicators in welcoming all of us, the dear distinguished participants and contributors, both online and those here physically, to the 16th Annual Conference. Ladies and gentlemen, it seems very clear that having blended engagements like this one is becoming a vastly established norm. So we should embrace it. Our dear participants online, thanks so much for creating time and being with us. Dr. Dolan Chris gave us an elaborate framing of this conversation. He raised quite a number of questions, and he invites us to reflect on the different aspects of the profound harms experienced by forced migrants and the different gendered angles and dynamics involved. I'm very sure when they gave opportunity to the plenary to comment or contribute to that, reflect on that, people are still digesting that. So we can continue digesting that. Dr. Chris Dolan is still with us. I'm sure if there is any question directed to him pertaining the framing of the conversation, he will be very glad to respond to it. UCA and Refugee Law Project have meticulously assembled a very great panel, as you may see, who are here to reflect with us the mental health and COVID-19, looking at the challenges, looking at the lessons and opportunities. In the interest of time, I will invite our first panelist, who is going to look at access to justice, access to mental health, and psychosocial services for refugees under COVID-19 pandemic. And that is none other than Mary Campogo. But before she comes, allow me just tell you briefly who Mary Campogo is. She is a program manager, mental health and psychosocial well-being at the Refugee Law Project, School of Law, Makerere University. Mary is a counseling psychologist who has been in this trade for some time. She's been in the practicing for 15 years. Wow, quite an experience. And she holds a Master's of Arts in Counseling, and she is a member of the Uganda Counseling Association. She's a mentor, she's a trainer, and she's done a lot of work around mental health. She's been working with Refugee Law Project for over 5 years now. The manager kept wondering, how do you handle these issues? And Mary has been handling them for 5 years now. Mary, during this time, has been involved in mentoring mental health and psychosocial workers, including issues on resilience network through facilitating survivors-led support groups, training different stakeholders on issues of mental health and psychosocial support, as well as advocacy through various national and international platforms. She has keen interest in working with children and has wide experience in child protection and psychosocial support for children. Mary's involvement in national platforms, including working groups such as National Child Protection Working Group, Mental Health Working Group, and Persons of Concern Working Group, has made her adept for mental health and psychosocial dynamics for both host migrants and hosts. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the person who is coming to speak to us this morning on issues of access to mental health and psychosocial services for refugees under COVID-19 pandemic. Mary, you're welcome. Let's put our hands together for Mary.
Thank you, Jimmy. Good morning once again. Good to see all of you. My name is Mary. Jimmy has already introduced me. And I'm glad to be here, all protocol observed. So I'm going to be talking about access to mental health in the context of COVID-19. And I'm going to try and do very few minutes because we are not very good on our time. So I'll try to skip some of the slides that I was going to use, but I'm sure that I'll say the key things that I wanted to say. And so one of the things that I want to say is that what the director has thoroughly well discussed, I like the way he put it, because he was asking us questions to reflect and giving us specific examples. And so that actually makes my work easier, because now we understand the different challenges, psychosocial, that are very complex in understanding that forced migrants, specifically refugees and asylum seekers, go through. So I'll not labor much onto that. But I'll go direct to, when we talk about psychosocial services, what are we talking about? And so when we talk about psychosocial services for refugees, forced migrants, and hosts, what are we talking about? And usually we talk about MHPSS, mental health and psychosocial support services. And so that's what I'm going to try and explain. And when we talk about that, we are talking about majorly three things. We are talking about protection, we are talking about promotion of well-being. All services that are looking at that is within the psychosocial services. We are talking about prevention of mental disorders. And when we talk about mental disorders, we're talking about conditions that people have which make it difficult to function in their daily life. And then we're talking about treatment of mental disorders. And when you look at those, you are looking at levels of well-being that when we talk about psychosocial support and mental health support, we are talking about. Now, when we talk about access to promotion services, to protection services for refugees, which includes treatment, which includes housing, which includes many things that we put within the context of COVID-19, we are looking at things like discrimination. We are looking at people being able to meet with one another. We are looking at, Dr. Chris talked about it, what does it mean if you're not able to speak a language and you need the information and you need to interact? And so, if you're not able to speak the to speak the language, it means that you're going to be stressed. When you're stressed, your mental well-being cannot be okay. And so that affects your mental well-being. Increase in conflict during COVID-19 in the homes has been talked about in newspapers everywhere. And so when there is turmoil and conflict within the family, within the home, then mental disorders or mental health problems are likely to come. So it's been difficult to prevent mental disorders through psychoeducation, through giving people information, especially refugees, because of language issues, people being together and they can't move, they can't get the needs that they want, increase in food prices and all services. Up to now, transport is very expensive. The costs are very high. Food, most of the things are still high because people are not able to move from different parts of the country to take commodities where they are supposed to take them. Treatment of mental disorders. I was listening on the World Mental Health Day, the 10th of October, the executive director of Butabika Hospital, telling us how the hospital has gone beyond 3 times. The people they get, the people with mental disorders they get, with mental illness they get in Butabika, were multiplied by 3. What does that mean? That means that there are more people who are being mentally disturbed and the services are few. Now what happened is that due to limited movement, refugees who wanted to access mental health services, even from Butabika, even from Health Center 4 that Dr. Olaro was talking about, were not able to go there. What does that mean? That means that their conditions, which had been put under control, become uncontrollable. And so they are unable to function normally in their lives. Now, what does this mean? This means that as mental health workers, counselors here, doctors here, we need to change the approach. We need to change the way that we look at mental health and the way we look at how we provide the services. If you're not able to meet the person physically, what does that mean? What do you do? What do you do to ensure that they actually get the service they need? Please, if you can mute. And so, COVID-19 challenges us a lot. What it has done is to uncover, Dr. Chris talked about it, the needs were there, a lot. Refugees have always had mental health and psychosocial needs, but COVID-19 brought them up in the open, even in the host. So what do we do as mental health workers to make sure that we actually up our game and ensure that we reach the people that we are supposed to reach? At Refugee Law Project, one of the things that we did was to change our methodology and begin offering telemental health, where we are able to call, to do teleconferencing, to do meetings with clients on Zoom, on using online. It's not easy. It comes with challenges. And as we enter these other approaches that we've not used before, as a counselor, as a mental health worker, how are you going there? What are the impacts? Are you able to adjust? Are you able to cope? Are the refugees you're giving the services able to cope and adjust? Now, what do we miss if we don't address mental health challenges? We miss a lot. We miss a lot. One is that when people go through traumatic experiences and they are not helped, their emotions are affected. When our emotions are affected, even the way we respond to life changes. So it can lead to violence, it can lead to suicide. The people who spoke first talked about it. It can actually hinder economic, social development. But we also know that it can lead to transgenerational trauma, where trauma goes through generations. And we know from Vietnam War and from all the wars that the world has had, that actually trauma can move through probably the fourth generation, as some books say. And so I can go direct to what have we learned. One of the key things we have learned from Refugee Law Project is the fact that until we are able to empower the communities to take care of their mental well-being and seek support when things are beyond, then we are not offering the services, because the mental health workers are very few. And if we talk about 1.4 million refugees, how many people are going to reach them? And so one of the things we have learned is that when you empower the community to take care of themselves, when you give them peer counseling skills, because during lockdown, it is support group members, it's the refugees themselves that were calling on each other and supporting one another. The other one is that when you do telemental health, one of the things we have seen is that it gives you more time to give to clients that need it most. Because with telemental health, you use lesser time to help people sort simpler things that would bring them to office, especially the refugees, that they don't have the transport to come. And then you spare that time for people who are struggling with higher mental health needs. Some of the challenges have been talked about. Limited funding, that one is very clear. Stigma, there's still a lot of stigma towards mental health services, but also people who have mental health challenges. And then the other one, I think, it is still difficult to monitor and show the impact of mental health support services. And we need, as counselors here, as mental health workers here, until we are able to show to the government, until we are able to show to the donor that this is the impact and this is what comes out of the interventions, we are not going to get funding. So we need to think around that. What do we do to measure and monitor success of the psychosocial support services that we offer? And then definitely we need to do research. For us to be able to monitor and show evidence, we need to do research. There are opportunities. One of them is that COVID-19 has made everyone realize the importance of MHPSS. I was reading a report the other day, and it was showing that Ministry of Health has trained 330 people in psychosocial skills to support within the COVID response. That is a sign, counselors, that your services are actually beginning to get recognized. Jimmy is pushing me away from here, and yes, I am leaving. The other one is that there's an opportunity for us to focus on prevention. And prevention is easier because we can easily prevent mental health problems from coming to people by supporting them before they reach mental illness. And so, as we talk about forced migrants and all they have gone through, let us not forget the host community. Let us concentrate on those areas where we can actually do prevention and have fewer people enter into a scenario where they need treatment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mary, for that elaborate presentation on access to mental health and psychosocial support for refugees under the COVID-19 pandemic. She was very explicit and very clear, and she made mention that refugees do not come and land in a vacuum. They land in communities where they're hosts, and therefore it's very, very important to look at hosts as well as we look at issues pertaining refugees and mental health. Mary, thanks a lot for that. In the interest of time, ladies and gentlemen, allow Lani Okwari is a senior medical officer working with the Ministry of Health, Mental Health Division. He is a practicing psychiatrist and a coordinator in the National COVID-19 Task Force, Mental Health and Psychosocial Services sub-pillar. He's also a trainer and a content developer of MHPSS. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Dr. Kalan Kenneth Okwari to speak to us this morning on COVID-19 restrictions and people's mental health and psychosocial well-being, sharing the experiences from the frontline workers in Uganda. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I think he has introduced me well. I really won't add much to the introduction. All protocol observed, I want to thank you for the opportunity and for inviting us to come and present. Dr. Hafsa was initially supposed to present, but she's engaged in some other activity, and she sends in her apologies. So what I'm going to share with you today is basically the MHPSS in COVID-19, the experiences that we got from Ministry of Health. What have we done so far, or what has been done? Okay. I won't dwell so much into the definitions going into this discussion because most speakers have alluded into for example, definition of mental health and the definition of psychosocial support. But just to reiterate, WHO defines mental health as a state of well-being in which the individual, one, realizes his or her abilities. Okay? The second part is can cope with the normal stresses of life and can work productively and fruitfully and is able to make a contribution to his or her community and not just the mere absence of mental illness. So that is to be clear. Psychosocial support, I won't dwell so much into the definition of psychosocial support, but just to say that it's that care and support which influences both the individual and the social environment in which these people live. So this care ranges from care and support offered by the caregivers at home for if someone is sick. In this context, we are talking about COVID, the family members, the friends, neighbors, teachers, health workers, community members on a daily basis. So it's that support that we give to people in need on a daily basis, and can also extend to care and support offered in the professional or specialized institution. So why has MHPSS attracted so much attention in COVID-19. I always tell the people that I speak to that this is our time to shine. We have never been given so much attention as this time, we the mental health and psychosocial support workers. Even in the response, I remember, as I will share the experiences later, I'm happy that I can see some frontline workers, people we worked with in the quarantine and in the isolation centers here. Florence, I can see you, and Grace, I can see you. So they would share the experiences and they would look for us, look for us. Please help us talk to these patients, help us calm the situation down. They will look for MHPSs. So it's in that regard that I can say, or confidently say, that this is our time to shine. Let's make the impact, so that even when COVID passes, our impact will be felt forever. And we can use this opportunity to actually to front our ambitions as mental health and psychosocial support. So COVID-19 has caused a lot of disequilibrium in the mental health and environment, leading to a lot of instability that can be pointed. For example, there's a lot of uncertainty. And where there is uncertainty, someone's mental health is checked. You're anxious. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. For example, we don't know when children will go back to school completely. We don't know when this COVID situation will go off. We don't know when we shall live normally again. We don't know when the vaccine will be gotten. We don't know when the treatment for COVID will be gotten. There are very many changes